I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Anybody can come on camera and talk for 40 minutes about the best epics in the game, or the best legendaries in the game, or those sorts of videos, so I like to spice it up a little bit and make it a little bit more interesting and a little bit more valuable for the viewers. So we're going to be talking about some of the best value over replacement options, and essentially just alternatives that you can use to legendary, or in some cases mythical champions that are of the epic or lower rarity. So that might be just a whole jumble of words for you to understand, but let's go ahead and hop into it here first, and we'll take a look, and I'm sure you'll understand as we go. So the first champion we're going to be talking about is Arbiter. And we're essentially going to be finding a replacement for her that's either epic or lower, essentially. So what does Arbiter do? Well, she has a increase attack, then filling the turn meters by 30%. She also has an AoE revive. So those are the two most important parts of her kit. I would say her base stats are incredible. Of course, she does have the 110 base speed, which is probably not something we're going to find in the epic level, unfortunately. The champion that I recommend replacing her with, or the champion that I think can do a fantastic job replacing her, is going to be Gorgorab. Gorgorab is an old epic by all means, and he's definitely been power crept a little bit, but what does he bring to the table? Well, he fills everybody's turn meter by 15% and still places the big version of an increased attack on your team. Not only that, he also has an AoE revive that brings them back with the same amount of HP, then heals them by 25%, and the heal will happen even if there's no dead allies. So essentially that means he can still heal your team even if nobody's dead and keep them nicely topped up. On top of that, he does also have an ally speed in arena battles by 23%, which is an incredibly strong aura as far as epic auras go inside the game. So he's very, very strong on that front. And his A1 does have a chance of removing one random buff as well. So when you consider everything all together, he is very, very similar to Arbiter, where her A2 has the chance of decreasing the enemy buffs, right? She has that AoE revive, she has the ally speed in arena battles aura, and then she has the increased attack and revive. So their kits have a lot of overlap. Gorgorab is the champion that I picked as the replacement for Arbiter. Next up, we're actually going to be talking about a champion that I pulled here fairly recently, and I haven't had a chance to build him yet or put out a video on him. That is going to be Leorius. Leorius is a very interesting champion because he has this passive that instantly places an unkillable on himself for one turn before receiving a fatal hit. And he also has a passive where damage increases as the champion's HP decreases by 1% for every 1% of HP lost. So essentially, if he's lost 99% of his HP, he's going to do 99% more damage, which is insane. He has an A3 where he attacks everybody, places a True Fear, also places a Weaken before attacking. He has an A2 that attacks everybody 2 times. He's also immune to Stun, Freeze, Sleep, Provoke, Fear, True Fear, Petrification debuffs when it's not on cooldown. So this guy is absolutely insane. He can essentially just sit there, tank up a bunch of hits until, you get a chance to use his A2. Rather his A3, and he's immune to crowd control while his A2 is not on cooldown, so he's absolutely fantastic, and he's very fast at 106 as well. Now, who did we get to replace this particular champion? I'm not gonna lie, the champion is not quite the same, not quite god tier, but she is still very, very strong, and that is going to be Skullcrown. Skullcrown is a fantastic champion that has the same kind of skill on her kit, where she places an unkillable on herself for one turn every time her HP drops below 20. So keep in mind, it doesn't necessarily have to be a fatal hit like it does with Leorius, just her HP dropping below 20%. She then has an A2 that attacks all enemies with a 75% chance of placing the Weaken for 2 turns, so very similar to Leorius's kit, and her A1 is an AoE as well, placing an extra hit if they have more than 50% HP. Additionally, if you have Senesha, she's actually going to revive herself with 30% HP when Senesha is on the same team. Senesha, of course, being the other version of the Twisted Sisters from the Knight's Revenant. She also has an AoE that places an extra hit on enemies with less than 50% HP. If you've been around in the game for a while, you probably recognize these two because they were, of course, part of the Blender compositions forever inside the arena, where you'd essentially just go in with a speed boost, increase attack, and then an ally attack, and then have these two just absolutely nuke everybody down. She has a putting a target skills on cooldown. These two champions in combination are very strong. If you have Skullcrowns built out in, say, for example, like a Stone Skin as well as a Savage or something like that, which is actually possible these days, she can essentially guarantee herself 2 turns, which is very, very strong, right? So she's going to be able to survive everything. With her Stone Skin on, she gets a turn. Then she also can survive because she has the Unkillable for another turn on top of that. The only thing to keep in mind with this champion is, of course, she does not have the immunity to any sort of crowd control debuff. So you might want to also run her inside a pinpoint set so you get that, or an immunity set, right? So that's something to consider. Next champion that we're going to be talking about is actually from the demon spawn. So there's a couple different champions that you could kind of substitute this one for. So you can look at Duchess, first of all, who has an AoE revive with 75% HP. Then also a Veil and a continuous heal, right? So that's one of the champions you can look at. You can also look inside the Lizardman. There is Pythion, who has the AoE revive with 50% HP and turn meter, and a strengthen on all allies for 2 turns. This is probably most similar to who we're going to be replacing. The champion we are replacing this with is going to be an epic from inside the Bannerlords faction, and that is Ursala the Mourner. Ursala is probably the best reviver inside the game at an epic level, if not, second best. So either number 1 or number 2, and that's not really, there's no question about it, essentially. The reason for that is because her revive revives everybody with 75% HP, then fills their turn meters by 50%, also places an increased defense and a strengthen for 3 turns. So this is just straight up better than Pythion's revive, right? It's just straight up better. She has very solid base stats with 18,000 HP, very low defense though for a support champion, decent speed though, right? This revive is insane, especially for an epic level. Not only that, her A2 also has a 100% chance of placing a decreased attack on the enemies, and she's also placing an increased attack on your team. And her A1 also decreases the turn meter by 10% on a 55% land rate. This champion is insane, and she also has a speed in Doom Tower battles by 24%. All things considered, the only other epic champion that really gives Ursala a run for her money is going to be Godseeker Aniri, and Godseeker, it's predominantly because of the teams that she enables or the things that she enables you to do, especially inside like Sand Devils or something like that. Ursala, though, is an absolutely fantastic champion, and I don't think she gets the love that she deserves inside the game. I don't see too many people talking about her these days, and I definitely think that she does have a place, at least inside, for example, a tag team arena, right? If you need a good defensive champion, or if you need a tanky champion for your offense, right? Just build her in a stone skin, build her in bolster, something like that, and she can get work done for you, certainly. Next up, we are talking about one of the champions that I've always been a fan of, and I'm very happy because she recently got buffed, and that is Lady of Irith. Lady of Irith has this A3 where she's placing a strengthen and a continuous heal, and she decreases the cooldown of ally skills except her by 1 turn. This is on a 3-turn cooldown. Now, this part of the kit is not something we're going to be able to replicate, unfortunately. We do have the A2, though, where she removes all debuffs, then heals them, and that heal can be critical if they're not fully healed, placing a block damage buff. So granted, we're not getting an exact copy of this particular champion's kit, but we are getting very, very close. And the champion that we are going to be talking about is Apothecary. Apothecary is another old school epic, or rather rare in this case, that's been around in the game forever. Lots of people are going to know him, especially if you've been playing for a couple years. He's one of the champions that everybody wants to pull early on in their account. He has an attacks 3 times at random on the A1. He has an ally heal by 35%, and the heal can be critical. Now, this is on a 2-turn cooldown. He has very solid base speed at 106, so he can cycle his turns insanely fast. Not only that, he has an increased speed and a turn meter fill on a 3-turn cooldown, and this guy is rare, so his books are going to be easier to get. He does decent damage on the A1, especially if you have him built in Giant Slayer, and he can absolutely heal like a monster on that A2 as well. So as you can see from the reviews, he's fantastic for keeping your team alive, and he helped out my account so much. I remember running him quite often inside like Dragon's Den, for example, and he helped out a lot. Of course, you have him in Fire Knight. I was actually using him for a period in Fire Knight Hard as well, just to try and mess around with him. He's such a useful champion, and we can still get use out of him in 2024 as we go into 2025. So value over replacement. If you don't have Lady of Irith and you're looking for somebody who can kind of do the same thing, that's going to be your option. Next up, we have a couple of champions that we can talk about. So first of all, we do have, I believe she's Knight's Revenant, which is Crixia. Crixia on her alternate form has this skill where she's going to remove all debuffs, then decrease the cooldown of all ally skills except this champion by 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. We also have, I believe he's in Demon Spawn, and that is going to be Prince Kymar, who's going to reset the cooldown of all ally skills, fills the turn meter of all allies except this champion by 20% on a 6-turn cooldown. And the champion that we're going to be replacing those with is actually going to be inside the Knight's Revenant as well, and it is yet another rare. And it is, of course, Renegade. Now, once again, if you've been around in a game for some time, and you've been playing for some time, and you've set up Poison Combust teams or those sorts of things, you've probably used Renegade to do it because of her A3 that decreases the cooldown of all ally skills by 2 turns. She does damage herself equal to 30% of her HP, and it does happen even if it kills her. Now, the cool thing about this is she does also bring a decreased speed and a decreased accuracy on her A2, and she does also have a heal reduction, so 100% heal reduction at a 50% land rate on her A1, which makes her very viable for something like, of course, you know, Fire Knight or those sorts of things, because you're getting the decreased speed, you're getting the anti-heal, and you're getting turn meter, rather skill resets, which is absolutely insane. I used her quite frequently inside Dragon's Dungeon, as well as for a period Fire Knight's Dungeon as well, to essentially just reset skills between waves. I do still use her sometimes inside Ice Golem to reset my Taurus if I'm just trying to speedrun it, and especially if I don't want to have my Crixia running in there for whatever reason. I can be a bit weird with the teams sometimes, but she has very decent base stats as well, with almost 18,500 HP. Defense is quite low, so you are going to struggle to keep her alive, but 95 base speed is perfectly fine. It's something that we can work with. Now, lastly, we are going to be talking about a champion in the Dark Elves. This is a champion that you will get for free eventually, and it is Mythrala Lifebane. What does Mythrala do? Well, she's known for her poisons on the A1, where each hit has a 100% chance of placing it. She also brings an AoE Hex on a 2-turn duration on a 3-turn cooldown. Now, she is also placing an increased defense and an increased attack, which is not going to be something that we can replicate with the champion that we're going to be talking about. She does also have a cleanse, which isn't necessarily something that we're going to be able to replicate either. Essentially, the champion that we're going to be, using instead, or the champion that you could use instead, is going to be from the Skinwalker faction. Now, some of you might already know who it is. It is going to be an epic champion, and that is a Kemptum. Why a Kemptum? Well, he has a surprising amount of overlap with Mythrala Lifebane. First of all, his A1 is a 3x hitter. Each chance has a 50% chance of placing a poison. If they're under a Hex, each hit also has a 50% chance of applying a debuff spread effect, taking one random debuff from the target and placing it on all enemies. Now keep in mind this is a 3x hitter, so if you have, for example, block buffs, if you have poisons on there, if you have any sort of debuffs like that, he has a chance of basically spreading it to everyone else. Now, he does also bring his own Hex, so attacks all enemies 3 times, each hit having a 75% chance of increasing the duration of any Hex. If they're not under a Hex, each hit has a 75% chance of placing the Hex instead. Now, what makes this guy really cool is he has a 100% chance of inflicting damage from one poison debuff to enemies under a Hex whenever their allies receive damage from poison debuffs. He also has an ally speed in all battles by 18%. This passive, in case it's not quite clear what it does, essentially if you have 4 poisons placed on everybody, whenever an enemy gets a turn, as long as they're under a Hex, all of them are going to take damage equal to 4 poisons, which is absolutely insane. So you don't even necessarily need a poison combust or poison explosion champion. As long as you have a Kemptum, he can get the work done. I actually use him with Corvus and him inside my Dragon Hard team, and they can do it very efficiently. They're able to do it in like 2 minutes or less, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, of course, Mythrala does bring a lot more, so she brings the increased attack, increased defense. But if you're needing somebody to apply the Hex and certainly up the poisons as well, this guy can definitely help you in that regard. Let me know if there's any champions I missed, or if you'd like to see a part 2 of this video down below. As always, I'll see you guys in the next video.